I think we've got everybody in so far. All right, good to see everybody tonight. I'll try to keep an eye on the screen over here, and if there's anybody else that I need to add as we go along, I'll do that. Hey, we even have some of our vacationers joining us. All right. Well, it's good to see everybody tonight. What I would like to do is take the first little bit tonight to just review the 17 Bible time periods. We want to do that every time, make sure that gets good and lodged in our brains. And we'll do a little bit of before and after drill with that, kind of like we have done the last couple of weeks. And then the next thing we're going to do is keep building on what parts, what books and chapters go in which Bible time period. So we did the New Testament last week, which was really easy, but we're going to we'll review that very briefly, and then start working on our Old Testament. We probably won't get all of it tonight, and that's fine. And we probably won't get everything. Memorized right off the bat, but we want to start working on that. So I think everybody is. I think I've admitted everyone that has asked to join us. So, all right. So let's go through our 17 Bible time periods and see how we do. So I'll tell you what, instead of just running through the list first, let's do our before and after drill. Let's do that first and see how everyone's memory is. All right, so we're going to, we'll start by picking on elders. I think that's always a good place to start. All right, so Alan Rich, years of silence. What comes before it and what comes after it?
The years of silence would be before the return from captivity.
Okay.
And then afterwards, the life of Christ.
Good. All right. That one was too easy, so I'll give you another one. What about wandering in the wilderness?
Wandering in the wilderness, prior to that would be the Exodus.
Okay.
And after the wandering would be the invasion and conquest.
Good. All right. All right, Brian, what about the scattering of the people? Oh, I don't have any sound from Brian. You can do the hand motions if you
just a second.
There we go. All right, so before and after the scattering of the people.
The scattering of the people is after the flood, and then the patriarchs.
All right, the flood and then the patriarchs. Good. All right. All right. Sorry, I'm. It does my heart good to see a certain little one who's got the hand motion down, even when she's not saying anything. I'm telling you, this stuff gets in your brain, and it's good for us. All right, so all right, Jim Wilson, how about before and after the United Kingdom? Okay, I think I can read lips. All right, so before it is the judges, and after it is the divided kingdom. Good. All right. Laura, how about Judah alone, before it and then after it.
Before it is the United Kingdom, and
No.
after, let's see, Judah alone, and then captivity.
Before it is the
United.
nope.
Divided
kingdom. Right.
Yeah.
Divided kingdom. So
Yeah.
you've got United Kingdom, divided kingdom, Judah alone, and then
Yeah.
captivity. Okay, good. All right. All right. Ali Bekejan, invasion and conquest of the land. Before it and after it. Okay, I think I got that. All right, so give me the hand motions nice and clear where I can see them. Before the invasion and conquest. All right, wandering in the wilderness. Good. All right, and then the judges. Okay, very good, very good. All right. So let's just run through our 17 Bible time period all together, just as a refresher for everybody. I'm going to, I'll get you started, and then I'm going to try to sit here and be quiet and keep my hands to myself. All right. So everything around creation, Adam and Eve, Cain, Abel, the first sin, Cain, Abel, and Seth, all of that, the first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis, all of that is our first Bible time period, which is before the flood. Before the flood. If the first Bible time period is before the flood, then that logically means the second Bible time period is
Flood.
the flood. All right, keep going.
Scattering of the people.
Patriarchs.
The patriarchs.
Exodus.
The Exodus. Good.
Wandering in the wilderness.
Wandering in the wilderness.
Invasion and conquest of the land.
Invasion and conquest of the land.
Judges.
The judges.
United Kingdom.
United
Kingdom. Divided
kingdom.
Judah alone.
alone.
The alone.
Captivity.
Captivity. Good.
Return from captivity.
From captivity.
Return from captivity.
Years of
Years of silence.
The years of silence.
The life of Christ.
The life of Christ.
Early church.
The early church. Letters to Christians. Good. Very good. Very good. All right. So let's review the easy part from last week. We're going to put scripture limitations, scriptures to our individual Bible time periods. So let's do the New Testament first, because that's really easy. Okay. So if we're going to talk about the life of Christ, if I'm going to go to the part of the Bible that talks about the life of Christ, Ella, where do I go? What books of the Bible, what books of the New Testament do I go to? I can't hear you. So the Gospels. Good. That's exactly right. We're going to go to the Gospels, the good news about Jesus, right? And what are they? The littlest Bekejan has got the right idea. Roll the gospel chariot along. There you go. Good job. All right. So what are the Gospels? What are those books, Ella? I tell you what. Let me ask. I saw the Ferguson boys down here. Chase and Hunter, can you tell me the first 4 books of the New Testament the Gospels, the first four. Say it nice and loud. One more time.
Luke and John.
Very good. All right. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That's very good. And you just made some teachers really proud. That's good. All right. All right, good. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All right, Chase, what book comes next after John? Do you know?
I can't hear you.
Mark, Luke,
Matthew,
John.
Mark, Luke, John. What comes next? Acts. That's right. Acts. That's very good. All right. Now, one of our many adult students. What Bible time period do we attach to the book of Acts?
The early church.
The early church. That's exactly right. The early church. So the book of Acts tells us approximately the first 30 years of church history. Okay, from the first Pentecost after Jesus was raised through the end of the book of Acts is about 30 years. Okay, maybe probably a little bit more than that, but just in round numbers, it's about the first 30 years of church history. Okay, so the early church, that's the book of Acts. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, though that's the life of Christ. That's that Bible time period. The book of Acts is the early church, and so the rest of the New Testament. Chase, what comes after Acts? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts. What comes next? That's right. Letters to Christians. That's exactly right. And what's the first letter? What's the next book of the New Testament? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, and the letter to the Romans. There you go. Good job. All right. See, even big people sometimes have to sing the song too. All right. So Romans through Revelation, those are the very last Bible time period, which is
Letters to Christians.
letters to Christians. All right. So the New Testament is really easy. It breaks down nice and neat for us. All right. So, and that takes us. Some of the letters overlap with the Book of Acts. Some of them were actually written. Some of them were actually written in during the history that Acts includes. Some of them maybe were written, but during that same time period, we can't pin them down quite as nice and neat. Some of them come perhaps after the book of Acts was completed. So, but letters to Christians. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to shift gears and start talking about our other Bible time periods and the scriptures that go with them. Now, there are ways that we can break this down even further and get into a lot more detail. But what I want to do right now is I'm going to try to share my screen again, and there we go. All right, can you see my 17 Bible time period screen?
No.
No.
You cannot. Oh, got that. There you go. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to begin to look at, oops. I want to begin to look at our Old Testament Bible time periods and begin to attach
Screen went back.
okay, there we go, and begin to attach Bible time frames, or I'm sorry, scripture limits to our Bible time periods. All right. So, can you all see the screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. All right, we may have lost our Facebook live stream, but maybe it'll come back. All right, so our first Bible time period is before the flood. And you can remember this, you can remember this however you want, whatever works for you. You can remember that the flood is in Genesis chapter 6. So that means that everything before the flood is Genesis 1 through 5. Or you can remember, and this would be my preference, you can remember and begin to attach bits of information. So when you think about creation, well, that's Genesis 1 and 2. And the first sin, that's Genesis 3. And Cain and Abel and Seth, that's Genesis 4. And then generations between creation and the flood, that's Genesis chapter 5. However you want to remember that, before the flood is Genesis chapters 1 through 5. So before the flood, Genesis 1 through 5. It's pretty simple. But the first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis are before the flood. All right, before the flood. Now, this is a kind of just an interesting little tidbit. You can remember this or not. But as much time passes in Genesis chapters 1 through 5 as the rest of the Bible story combined. Now, I'm not talking about from the Bible story till today. I'm talking about the rest of the Bible story. That is the narrative of the Bible. And so there's a lot packed into that. And obviously what that means is we don't have that much detail, comparatively speaking. There's a lot that we just kind of fast forward over, particularly in Genesis chapter 5, with all of those generations. They just kind of go boom, 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 boom. And, you know, this one. And what it does is it connects all of that ancient history up to the period of the flood. So the first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis all go before the flood. All right, so that brings us then to the second Bible time period. And if you can remember that the first 5 chapters go with before the flood, then you can remember that the second Bible time period also gets 5 chapters in Genesis, 6 through 10. Okay? So just so you kind of make that connection in your own mind. There's 5 chapters before the flood, and now there are 5 chapters associated with the period of the flood. So 5 chapters. Now, obviously, it's not just the flood. It's God announcing that there's going to be a flood. It's all of the preparations around the ark. It's the ark itself. It's the end of the flood and coming out of the ark. All of that is involved in, but we put it all into the Bible time period of the flood. This includes the covenant of the rainbow in Genesis chapter 9, and then Genesis chapter 10. Again, we've got generations and those who descended from Noah. So the first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis go to which Bible time period?
For the flood.
Before the
Before
flood.
the flood. The next 5 go with what Bible time period?
Flood.
The flood. That's exactly right. All right. So before the flood and the flood. All right. Those are really easy. All right. So what's our next Bible time period? We've got before the flood, what comes next?
Scattering of people.
The scattering of the people. This is one chapter. Genesis chapter 11. This is one chapter. All right. Now, why would we give an entire Bible time period to one chapter of the Bible? Why is the scattering of the people so significant? Why is it so important that we give it its own Bible time period? Why not just lump it in with the flood or what comes after it?
Well, God's original plan was to multiply the earth, and this is how it was accomplished.
All right, that's exactly right. So you go from God saying, "All right, the flood's over. I want you to replenish the earth," and the people say, "No, we're going to stay right here and we're going to build this tower." And then when you get into the next Bible time period, where is you've got Abraham in Ur of the Chaldees. You've got him traveling and finding another group of people in another place, and you've got him traveling and finding another group of people in another place. The question is, how did that happen? How did you go from 8 people coming off of the ark to now you have population scattered all over the world for all practical purposes? You have distinct groups, families, and groups of people and whole nations that have developed in all these different places. How does that happen? And so this is the answer to that. Now, again, it's not given all of the detail that we might, in our human curiosity, want, but that's why this is so important. So the first 5 chapters of the book of Genesis go with what Bible time period?
Before the flood.
Before the flood. All right. If the first Bible time period is before the flood, what's the second Bible time period? The flood. That's right. And what book and chapters go with the flood?
6 through 10.
Genesis chapter 6 through 10. And then the next one is the scattering of the people, and that's Genesis chapter 11. So what's our next Bible time period?
The patriarchs.
Patriarchs.
The patriarchs. Guess where it starts?
Genesis 12.
Good. All right, good. I didn't think that was a trick question. Genesis chapter 12. Genesis 12. And it's the rest of the book of Genesis, all the way through Genesis chapter 50. Now, sometimes included in the patriarchs, there will be the inclusion of the first little bit of the book of Exodus, because they'll say, well, the Exodus hasn't really started. Moses is in Egypt, and, just cut it off at Genesis and put Exodus with Exodus. Okay. I think that's the simplest way. When we talk about the patriarchs, who are we talking about? What are the main characters of this Bible time period?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
All right. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those three are traditionally the ones that we call the patriarchs. But then from Genesis chapter 37 through the end of the book of Genesis, Jacob is still a major character, but the story really focuses on who?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph is the main character. The 12 sons of Jacob all each have their role in the story, but Joseph is the main character. So Genesis chapters 12 through 50, the age of the patriarchs, we're talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and especially and then including the story of Joseph. Joseph isn't kind of the patriarch in the sense that he was the father ruler. That's what patriarch means, that he was head over his whole family in the same way that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were. But he is in the sense that he is the main character. He's the one around whom the story kind of revolves. So Genesis chapters 12 through 50 is the patriarchs. Now, we've spent our first we've spent our first 4 Bible time periods just in the book of Genesis. And I want to take a minute just to think about that. 4 out of 17 Bible time periods. That's a pretty significant chunk. That's almost a fourth of all of the Bible time periods covered in one book of the Bible. And the only thing I want to say about that is just to say that ought to emphasize in our minds just how important the book of Genesis is. What does Genesis mean?
Beginning?
Beginnings. That's exactly right. It's the book of beginnings. And so just think about all of the beginnings that are found in the book of Genesis. Let's just brainstorm that for a second. What are some of the beginnings that are found in the book of Genesis?
Human life.
Good. Human life. Absolutely.
Sin.
Sin. Good.
Redemption from sin.
Yeah. The redemption from sin. The story of God making a way to be reconciled to him. Good. What else?
It's jealousy or envy or
Okay. Yeah.
kind of
All of those, and I'll just kind of throw that all in kind of one big bundle, but you have all of those things that have to do with human emotion and human relationships, all of those things that get wrapped up in when humans begin to interact with one another. And that also ties back to sin. Okay? What else?
Family.
Okay, good. The beginnings of family, the family unit. Okay, what else?
Marriage.
Good. I'm thinking about we mentioned broadly redemption. The story of God's redemption goes all the way back to the entrance of sin. Actually, I think it goes back even before that with just the concept of the tree of life. But you think about God's promises to Noah, God's promises to Abram, and repeated to Isaac and Jacob. You have all of these things that have their beginnings. There are threads that are woven into the Bible story, the rest of the Bible story, that have their beginning point in the book of Genesis. and that's what I want you to see. The more I read and the more I study the book of Genesis, the more appreciation I have, the more beginnings I see, the threads that I pick up on, the connections that are there to other themes and to other things that develop in the Bible story. So
I was thinking about worship.
absolutely,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. The idea of worshiping God, yeah, the idea of I would even go beyond worship, Alan, and use the word service. In other words, you have kind of the formal things that we do in terms of worshiping God, but then also the ways that we serve God's purposes in other, maybe less formal ways. The concept of work or industry, the idea that man is to be busy and doing, serving God, serving his fellow man. All of that is involved. Yeah, absolutely. So
I thought of sacrifice,
absolutely. Yeah,
closely linked to worship and service, but
yeah, the theme of sacrifice. So all of these are beginnings. And when you begin to brainstorm a list like that, or even just take a few minutes and thumb through the book of Genesis and just think through things that are beginnings. I think it gives us a new, maybe not a new, but it reminds us of the appreciation that we ought to have for that book of the Bible. So I'm going to stop that for just a minute, and let's see what we remember. So I'm going to call out a Genesis chapter number, and you tell me which Bible time period it goes in. And if you can remember anything about the context of that chapter of Genesis, we'll just call that bonus points, okay? It's kind of like whose line is it anyway? It's all made up and points don't matter, except it's not all made up. Okay, so let's just see how we do. Okay, so Genesis chapter 11. Tom, what Bible time period?
Gathering of the people.
Scattering of the people. That one is pretty evident. It's the scattering of the people. It's the story of the Tower of Babel and the scattering of the people. Okay. Laura, Genesis chapter 7.
that's the flood, the story of the flood.
Good. All right. The Bekejan clan. I'll let you all put your heads together. Genesis chapter 15.
Patriarchs.
The Patriarchs. Very good. Very good. And by the way, Genesis chapter 15 is one of the covenant passages where God kind of formalizes his covenant with Abraham. That's a good one to remember. Wilson's, what about Genesis chapter 12?
Patriarchs.
Good. The Patriarchs. And it's the beginning of that. And so what significant Bible thread is first introduced in Genesis chapter 12 with the beginning of the Patriarchs?
God's promises.
There you go. That's right. God's promises to Abraham. Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you can remember that God's promises to Abraham are kind of what set the patriarch story in motion, and you remember that Bible time period starts with Genesis chapter 12, you see how you kind of connect those dots. And so you think about God's promises to Abraham. Okay, well, where do those start? Those start in Genesis chapter 12. So there you go. All right, what about Genesis chapter 3, Riches?
Before the flood.
All right, before the flood. What do you remember about Genesis 3? Do you remember what's in that chapter?
That's the story of Eve in the garden and
Good.
Adam as well with
Yeah.
the forbidden fruit.
Yeah, the first sin. Good. All right. Baker Ferguson clan. What about Genesis 37? All right. So it's the period
It's
of
the patriarchs.
Good. All right. And I chose that chapter in particular because it starts kind of in detail the story of one major character through the rest of the book of Genesis.
Joseph, I guess.
Joseph, yeah. So his story really kind of begins to focus on Joseph in Genesis chapter 37. All right.
Jerry,
Yes.
I either heard or read that there are as many chapters devoted to Joseph as there was to Abraham. I've never really put a pencil to that, but there is close to an equal amount of chapters in Genesis between those two chapters.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably. I've never actually put a pencil to that, at least that I remember. But I'd say that's pretty close to right. Let's see, 12 through. Abraham dies in 25, right? Yeah. So 12 through 25, that would be 13, actually 14 chapters. And then you've got 37 through 50, that'd be 14 chapters. So it's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close. All right. So now I realize that seems very elementary, that seems rudimentary, and it is memorization. But it's helpful so that when we're searching for information, when we say, there's this, we're talking to somebody, or we're relating this to our children or grandchildren, and we're trying to tell them the story